completely different ways based on the skill set that they had on the job sites.
And the color, right? The one guy didn't like the black spray on WRB because it made the house feel like a dungeon while they were working on it. He wanted the bright yellow one, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Rob Wadsack, Digital Brand Manager.
Howdy.
Matt Milham, Deputy Editor.
What's up?
And Jeff Rose, Producer.
Hey.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it is a pleasure to see you gentlemen this morning. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel bad about getting you all out of bed, but, you know, that's how it is.
It's just nice to actually be awake and alive.
So, Rob, you sent us some photos earlier in the week of your little porch on the back of your barn. How's that coming?
I didn't actually work on it a whole lot this week because it's summer and I felt like I needed a little bit of a break. And so I've been doing some kayaking and some biking with my family. But I did buy materials for the next step in that project. So, you know, as we said, it's a porch roof over a little tiny existing deck perched high on the back of my barn overlooking the Housatonic River. And my neighbors decided to build a terrace on their property about 20 feet away at exactly the same time that I was doing this project. So I'm like, I'm out there, you know, waving to them. And I know they're, you know, they were hoping this was going to be their little private getaway in the back corner of their property. So I was like, you know,
you need a spotlight.
Yeah. I kind of.
How you guys doing over there?
You know, what I was thinking of doing is, you know, when you go to those, like the Statue of Liberty and they have got those little coin operated, binoculars, just bolt one of those on the side of the deck. But no, I am doing the opposite of that. I'm actually, I was going to put up some sort of like shadow box sort of fencing. And I was like, you know what? There's a beautiful view of the, you ever seen shadow box fencing? It's where they have the boards that are just vertical boards like board and batten, but you leave a space and then the air can pass through between the boards and light kind of filters through, but you cannot see through them. So I'm doing sort of I was like, well, I want to be able to still see the river in that direction, but not see them. So I came up with this idea, and other people I've found online have done similar things, is, you know what Bahama shutters are? They're basically like wooden storm shutters. They're usually made of really big louvers. And
they're hinged to the top, right?
They are, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a wall that's basically a vertical version so that I can see out at an angle towards the river, but I can't see my neighbors right next to me. Cool. It's more a matter that I just wanted an architectural detail that was fun to build and that wasn't a solid wall. So I've bought all the lumber for that, and I was going to buy pressure treated 5/4 decking, but of course
you can't buy that.
None of that in the store. So I was like, what the heck? What am I going to do? And I was wandering in the lumber aisle and I found these, I forget what they call them, but they're basically just 8-inch rough sawn boards that I think are designed for people who are building formwork or something. It's throwaway wood. It's not meant to be used in actual finished construction, but the nice thing is that it's rough sawn, so it has the same texture as my board siding on the house, on the barn. So I'm just going to kind of hit it quick with the planer just to take the fuzziness off and rip it into 4-inch louvers and use that for my shutter.
Are you going to paint them or are you going to leave them natural?
I've actually been using this slate gray semi-transparent stain on the whole deck, so I'm just going to use that. I on exterior stuff like that, I like going with a stain because I don't want to ever have to scrape it again. You know, I might have to scuff it up a bit, but it should work good.
Cool.
Yeah.
How's the family supporting this project?
Oh, they're happy with any project that I do back there, and I mean they're not as excited about it as I am. I expect to be hiding out there, and you know. Eventually, and it'll be my little
they're excited about.
Yeah.
How about you, Matt? What have you been doing?
Oh man. Well, I'm working on an article with Mike Curtin on fire blocking, and Since we don't have access to the studio space really, and I don't really want to just go down there to, build and shoot stuff down there. I was like, well, I've got some places that definitely need fire blocked in my own house. And so I started work on that. Took down this awful paneling in my basement on this one wall, thinking I was just going to build a soffit there. And there's a bunch of other things that needed fire blocking there anyway. And found a mouse graveyard inside of that wall because there's a suspended ceiling, and there was no fire blocking in that wall. So all these mice had sort of like gone to the edge of this suspended ceiling, looked down, or just kind of like wandered over, fell, a good 7 feet, and then couldn't get back up. And it was like sort of like Indiana Jones, like, if you or any of these things where you like fall into a pit and it's just like filled with bones, like, like something from like like you find these like dinosaurs or whatever, just like a pile on the bottom of a hole. That's
I'm
exactly
never going to be able to
going
sleep
on.
again.
Oh my God. It was a nightmare. I opened up the wall. I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I do this? I should have just gone to the office.
This seems to be a theme. Didn't you guys have last week? Mason Lord sent you some photos of some nice stuff he found on the wall.
Yeah. But for a second, I was staring at it, trying to figure out what I was looking at, because it was just like, I don't know, probably at least 4 inches thick of just like gray mat, almost like, it looked almost like bird feathers, and it was just fur and just filled with bones. I mean, like I saw these I thought they were strings, and they were all just spines. It was disturbing.
So horrible.
Yep. In every stud bay.
Well, I got to tell you, that article is a huge undertaking. Like code stories, I think, are the hardest for construction magazines to pull off, right? Because things vary and it has to be right. And that's a complex issue, right?
Yeah, it is. And, the code sections on it are really small. Like the section on fire blocking, in terms of sort of, like the basic idea of it, is like one paragraph. And then you have to kind of really extrapolate. They give you a handful of things that need to be fire blocked, but it's not an extensive list. So, you're trying to convey something that's relatively complex, and it's simple in idea, but when you're building a complex house, it can be difficult to know exactly where you need to put this stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So I haven't read the most recent version of that code. Is it basically basically giving you requirements as sort of like between levels of floors or between this and that? And so what you're saying is that if you have some complicated roof intersections or split level house or something like that, you'd have some complicated things to figure out on your own.
Yeah, anytime you build something that's not just basically a box, with it, like platform framing takes care of a lot of the fire blocking, but as soon as you start adding stairs or soffits or anything like that, and then you're making things more complicated and things that need to be fire blocked to keep basically smoke and flames from moving from one concealed space to another concealed space. So.
Well, man, I think that's great, and that is certainly valuable content. And I know there's been a couple of times where I've had to satisfy building inspectors with that work that I had overlooked. So it is easy to do.
Yeah.
Jeff, what have you been doing?
More trim, repair, and painting. Nothing exciting.
Are you getting sick of it, or are you feeling like you're making progress?
In sort of like, this is good for me kind of a way, rather than this is fun.
I haven't been doing much. Something that stuck in my head recently was we heard from a listener, and forgive me, I forget his name, but he was just talking about our discussion in episode 55, how to spend $2,500 on tools. And I'm going to read part of what he said here. As a DIYer that has done one full gut remodel, one room at a time while living there, and is about to start a second, I was excited when the episode started, thinking I was going to learn little gems of professionals. Instead, ended up as a nerdgasm over big ticket items. Well, I had to go find this email in my voluminous inbox, and what made it easy was the word nerdgasm, because it was the only email that popped up when I went searching for that. But I've been thinking about what are the secret weapon tools that I know of and have, and I thought of a couple. Do you guys know what this is? And I'm showing up something for those of you listening. It's not helpful, I
It's
understand.
kind of
but
like a high heel shoe.
it does. It's a piece of heavy steel. It's got a forked end on it for pulling nails, and this other kind of slotted end. And it's called a roof snake. And when you need to replace a shingle, it allows you to drive in new nails to secure it without bending the shingle above. Especially when you have older shingles, it's very hard to bend that up enough to drive nails without breaking the shingle, and this allows you to do it. And the forked end allows you to pull out the nails to replace the shingle. It's exactly the right shape, and it's slim, so it fits under the shingle. But this is like, I'm going to say this is one of those secret weapon tools. And this is another one. And actually, one of our listeners wrote in about this as a secret weapon tool. This is a hide. I think they call it a molding bar / scraper. And it's just an L-shaped piece of steel with, both ends are sharpened. And this is the must-have tool for removing casings and base trim and other moldings to get started especially. And it's genuinely very useful as a scraper. And the listener pointed out that you can buy different brands of these, but the hide version has better steel and won't bend. And this is a fabulous tool. Do you guys have one of these?
Yeah, although I don't think I have the hide, but I did find some really good ones that were really inexpensive. They were actually sold as tools to basically break open beehives. So like people who keep bees. And I was like, I couldn't believe it because it was 2 for like $10 or something like that. Unbelievable. And they're fantastic. I don't think I've ever had bars like that were as good as these. And, they weren't made for construction necessarily, but they do the job fantastically.
Well, on the topic of pry bars, though, it's like I think I've said before, we were talking about this, you really have to have half a dozen different pry bars if you're doing remodeling work, at least.
Yeah.
And because those thin ones are great for stuff that's put in with very small finishing nails.
Or getting started, right? You get started with this, and then you put something bigger in, right?
But if my favorite pry bar that I've found, and I don't remember the brand, there was some popular brand that made these and then everyone copied them, is the ones that have a really nice thin blade like that, but it's just slightly curved and taped and really flared at the tip. And then it's a cast or forged pry bar. And so it necks down to a really fat handle, which doesn't bend at all. And it gets in on, it allows you to get in on thin stuff without damaging it, but still have the leverage to pop it out.
You nodded, Jeff, that you have one of these. Do you have this brand?
Yep. Yeah. And when I was doing the wall repair on my basement, getting the clapboards off, getting behind the clapboards, that was the go-to. And it's a 5-in-1 tool.
Yeah, that's a good thing to start pulling stuff off with too. But I love this, and it's small enough to carry in your tool belt without killing you.
Yeah.
A Japanese style cat's paw. For those of you who don't have one of these, if you have the Western style, this is so freaking superior. It'll blow your mind. And I like the kind that has the cat's paw on both ends. Some of them only have it on one end. Some of them have a flared like pry bar on the other end. I hate that because it cuts your hand when you're holding it. Especially, sometimes you have to really hold these things tight while you're wailing on it with a hammer. And this one has a cool little dimpler thing at the top. And that's meant to like crush the wood fibers around the nail so you can more easily get the prying part around the head. And I carry this in my carpenter's rig all the time. One more. So it took me decades to pry open my wallet to buy this, but you guys will probably recognize this as a Starrett combination square. Mm-hmm. And, these things are not inexpensive. I want to say these are like $50 or more, but I found this one at a garage sale and it was like $20. But it is such a precise tool. It makes your life so much better. It's just an absolute joy to use.
And almost every single one of those that you find used will be missing that little scribe.
Mine's gone.
Yeah, of course.
I don't find that all that useful, except when you can't find your pencil. It just happens to be on there. But
I don't even know that most people realize what it's there for. Maybe they unscrew it and they're like, what the heck is this pin?
If listeners have probably heard folks extol the virtues of this, but if you don't have one, what makes it different is that It locks securely. It moves with great precision, so you can, move it a 32nd of an inch or whatever, and then lock it in, and it just works. Just works fantastic. And one of the things carpenters do with these is you hold a pencil on the end to like draw a parallel line to a board on the edge of a board or what have you, and this just sails along there. I don't know what is different about it, but it just works. And I just will briefly contrast to this piece of junk that I somehow ended up with. So this is one of those things that seems like a good idea, right? It's a similar combination square, but instead of having the knurled knob with the screw that locks it in place, it has a magnet. Except that, like, when you try to draw a parallel line, the thing slides. It's totally useless. This is its one job, and it can't do it. So throw that away. So those of you who listen to the show and you have cool tools that are real gems, please let us know, and we'll talk more about that ongoing, because I do think it's a good discussion.
And if it's something really obscure that people might not be familiar with, take a picture and send it to us too, so we can share it.
One more. So I don't use this for much, but this is the secret weapon when you're cutting foam insulation, and this is a Tajima Alumist breakaway utility knife, and this thing is fantastic for cutting foam and polyiso board. And once again, it's just a good tool. This company, Tajima, makes fantastic hand tools. It's a Japanese company, and Japanese carpenters and Japanese manufacturers seem to have a different standard for quality with regard to hand tools. So pretty much anything I've ever touched from that company is gold.
So Patrick, you know what I use? You use that little knife for cutting your foam insulation. I just go to the dollar store and buy a $2 pack of those really thin steak knives. Yeah. Those things work pretty good too.
Yeah. I got some other stuff too. Maybe I'll share that next time. But those of you listening, send us your cool tools that we don't know about. So we got some good feedback as typical. This comes from Steve from Minnetonka, Minnesota. Hey, FHB podcast team. I wanted to respond to the discussion that we Minnesotans use our ice skates to go to work because it's the frozen tundra up here. To make the point, the only month on record that hasn't snowed in Minnesota is July, so it can be volatile. However, this past Saturday, the 18th, we hit 118 degrees with the heat index in southern Minnesota, and the Twin Cities were 107 with the dew point hitting 82 degrees. Can you imagine how horrible that must be? Yeah. 82 degrees. I've never heard it that high. He says, yes, it was dang hot. So it gets hot in here and humid. I have a global job that has taken me to Kuwait, 118 degrees, but like 14% humidity. Dubai had a heat index of 123 with humid. And Singapore, I think that was about 115 and very humid. I was there in the fall too. So I've experienced hot weather and confirmed it can get wickedly hot here. It can get wickedly cold too. I believe last year we had a couple of days of wind chill of almost minus 50. Walking to your car after a full day's work, yeah, it's cold. And we question why we live here. We also like to openly complain when it gets hot, like 95 plus and steamy. For the Duluth comment, they do get some lake effect. We have left the Twin Cities, drove 2.5 hours north, and it was 85 here and 60 degrees there. So in general, down by the water, it is brisk. And I want to say Lake Superior is something like 36 degrees surface temperature in the summer. That is insane.
What? That doesn't sound right.
He's not talking Celsius, is he?
I do believe one of the reasons we live here is the spring and fall and the change of the seasons. I know you likely also enjoy those changes and working outside when it's not on fire and you're dripping with sweat or having a layer just to go shovel your driveway. Hopefully this gives you a little perspective that it definitely gets hot in the Twin Cities, even though we do share a border with Canada. I would summarize it as such. Wintertime is long, but there are maybe 10 to 20 days of really, really cold. Summer is usually 10 to 15 days of super hot, like 95 to 105. And we attempt to focus on those days in the spring and the fall that are lovely and not humid. Sounds a little like New England, but a little more extreme.
Yeah.
Well, from my experience, being up in that area once or twice, when the weather is nice, people in Minnesota know how to take advantage of it. I mean, they have so many lakes and bike trails, and they just get out and enjoy that weather when it's good.
What was Dubai like, Matt?
Hot. I mean, it's like a lot. I mean, I've been to Dubai, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, a lot of hot places, places that get hot, at least in the summer. In the winter, they're tolerable. It doesn't get like, it's not blisteringly hot necessarily in the winter.
Is it still in the 80s though?
Yeah, during the day, but it'll get down to it can get really cold at night. I mean, not like necessarily freezing in Dubai or any of those places that I remember anyway. Or Kuwait, which I spent a year there. So but getting off the plane there at 2 o'clock in the morning and it was 120 degrees. They opened up the door to the plane and we walked down a set of stairs and it was unbelievable. They opened the door and it was felt like a jet engine was blowing in the door. And they were like, no, that's actually just the air. So
were you tempted to just get back on the plane and be like, screw this?
Yeah, you don't want to get off at that point, but you have to. And it is humid next to the coast. Like if you're right on the water, I felt bad for the Navy people and some of the folks who were in the port there who had to deal with that heat and humidity all day, every day. But I was just a few miles in, and it was just hot and not humid at all. You could deal with it when the humidity is not that bad.
I think the hottest place I was ever at was New Orleans in, I guess it was late summer or early fall. It was a year after Hurricane Katrina. And I remember we were at a Habitat for Humanity project, and I was outside talking to some people, and I had to go sit in the car and turn on the air conditioning because I was going to pass out because it was probably close to 100 and, it was 90% humidity, and I just couldn't deal. What's the hottest place you've been, Jeff?
I don't know, probably South Florida, I would guess, but nothing.
I wouldn't want to live in Arizona or Florida or the Gulf Coast generally. I think that's just too hot and oppressive. This comes from Andre. Listening to 261 this afternoon, I want to chime in on the AC boot discussion. What I have found during commercial kitchen refrigeration installations, usually there are 6 systems per commercial kitchen, is that you are completely right on the sequencing comment. It's a challenge to get all the trades lined up. What works is installing a piece of drain pipe through the roof. A 4-inch will do for 2 systems. Single systems will fit through a 2 or 3-inch pipe. Every job site has a mechanical contractor that you can borrow 30 inches of pipe from. Friction fit 2 90 degrees of the same pipe diameter to form a gooseneck. The roofer knows what to do with a pipe penetration with standard flashing kits, and life goes on and the job progresses with a roof jack that worked with your roofing system. As the sparking refrigeration guys get around to it, they can run their services through it. The loose elbows help out during rough-in and get glued after the services are in place. Add a little, that's a little bit if you ever want to be able to take it apart. Spray foam at both ends, and it's a durable assembly. What I found is that pitch pockets or gum boxes are regional standards with a lot of variability, and I just don't like depending entirely on sticky stuff being the only seal. Everyone everywhere understands flashing a pipe, and the products are on the back of every roofer's truck. Stay safe and keep giving out those stickers. We moved during spring, and I have to figure out a place of pride location for my sticker in the new shop. Best regards, Andre. So this is what you said, Matt, right?
Yeah, there are solutions. And I didn't talk about, using pipe like that, but they do make prefab gooseneck solutions like he's talking about. But his solution sounds great.
It's great. It solves all the problems that I identified and also makes a more reliable assembly without, like as he says, relying exclusively on sticky stuff.
Yeah.
Once again, this is going to be hard to do. Or not hard, but I mean, you'd have to disconnect all the electrical and refrigeration lines to do this in a retrofit situation. But for new work, or if you can, take this stuff apart, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a smart point he says too about leaving the elbows loose, running everything through it. I've seen people do a similar thing when they're trying to run power lines underground and they have to run the conduit, and there's just a tight bend that you got to get the cable through, and then you just glue it back together when you're done.
So some people are tempted not to glue electrical conduit and its fittings because they rationalize it doesn't need to hold water in or gas in or whatever. And, these electrical cables are rated for getting wet. But The problem is that groundwater will seep into these things, and inevitably it's going to make its way to your electrical panel and rot it out. So you really should be making these things airtight, watertight. Those pieces should be glued. People are tempted not to, but you really should.
But you should probably also have some way for that water to drain, because if that conduit goes outside, it's always expected to be a wet location. So, I mean, there has to be some other method to get that water out before it gets to the panel too.
And you're supposed to use duct seal compound where that the fitting comes into the panel, right? You're supposed to seal that to keep the humidity from accumulating inside there. So I don't know how you could keep it totally dry, but you should have a weather head on the other end, right, to shed the water, and it's important. I've seen panels that have had leaky conduits, and it doesn't take too long before they're completely trashed.
Yeah, and that's a serious hazard too.
Yeah, because then the breakers won't work if they're corroded, right? That is very serious, and stuff starts arcing. So I have a new part of the show that we're calling Ask Barbara, and Barbara played along. She's awesome. So she says, hello, FHB podcast crew. I was just listening to the pod as I walked up my driveway to put a package in the mailbox. And by the time I got back to the house, I was yelling physics at my phone. So do you think she's like yelling formulas, or is she just yelling physics?
That's what I imagined. Like, she's just like, physics.
It was good you put that at the beginning, because I have to save the rest of the podcast for later. Yes, of course I know why Kiley's doodad stopped working on capacitive touchscreens when the humidity went up. I must go to the right part of the internet, because I've never seen an ad for the COVID grabber. I'm glad Rob said it's like a skeleton key, because at least now I can make up an answer. I do know what Kiley was talking about as far as antimicrobial properties of materials. I read that paper a few months ago, the one that concluded the hospital design trend in favor of stainless steel over brass door handles and handrails was a huge mistake. It was about the coronavirus specifically. The scientists inoculated samples with the virus and then tested them at intervals and compared how much viable virus they found. They tested plastic, stainless steel, copper, and cardboard and compared the rate of decrease from the initial level. Copper was the winner. Brass is mostly copper, so I think it counts. I was interested because I sell a board game made of fiberglass and copper. So every time we learn something about Barbara that I find amazing. It's better than any other board game for germaphobes. No viable virus after 4 hours. I haven't gotten around to making a clickbait ad for it, though. I think she should. Honestly, cardboard didn't do that bad in the experiments. No viable virus in 24 hours. But my game is also dishwasher safe, so I win. Anyway, the fact that copper is a good electrical conductor is both why it doesn't support microbes and why it works on touchscreens, and why it stops working when it gets humid. It's oxidized. That thin layer of corrosion is electrically insulating. It's like what makes an old lamp flicker sometimes when you turn it on, but if you take the bulb out and sand the butt end of it with an emery board and scrape the part at the bottom of the socket, then it's as good as new. So take your COVID grabber and polish it with some barkeeper's friend, and it will work again. I recently read a thread on Twitter of people reminiscing about the old days working in bars and restaurants. One of them said they had to polish the brass work once a week. Others said they did it every night. Some of them hated it, but a few of them said it was their favorite part of the job. I think having the rag get black and seeing the shine come back is probably really satisfying. Victorian kitchens and bathrooms were all about white glazing and copper and brass. Funny how they got it right on the first try. I was really skeptical back in the 90s when that rough and rustic tile look got so trendy. I bet there are a lot of houses out there now that have more soap scum than grout in their stone-like doorless shower grottos. Looks like the trend has gone back to minimalism and cleanliness, though. Just in the nick of time. Yours in paragraphs, Barbara.
I think we need to do an ad for her in the podcast newsletter just as payment for her response. Can we dream up? Can we get one of these clickbait ads designed and put it in there?
I want to see the game, right?
Seriously.
Thanks, Barbara. As always, it's a pleasure hearing from you. Well, I think we better get to some questions before we run out of time. This comes from John. Hi, thanks so much for all the great information and conversation you all provide weekly. It seems like every week some subject comes up that I've been pondering a solution to. I really loved the last question on 265 about changing careers, circuitous routes to employment, and different options for learning. It resonated with me as I'm 32 but have switched my income streams multiple times. I'm a partner in a 2-person remodeling and custom carpentry business based in Providence. The company is called Civic Contracting. We do a blend of small to mid-sized residential and light commercial interior-exterior stuff. Projects are a mix of kitchens, baths, remodels, decks, porches, and build-ins with some repair work. I love the work I get to do. I also work part-time as a real estate appraiser, which I don't love as much, but hey, I'm writing to ask if you guys have any thoughts about how additions or upgrades to homes are valued. As you have mentioned before on the show, many improvements do not directly contribute to the sale price of a home. What do you folks think is the most undervalued improvement or upgrade in the current home market? I'm thinking air sealed followed by insulation, as it really could make a difference in what a homeowner can afford long term. It is a strange situation as expenses can make a large difference in commercial valuations, but are not really accounted for in the typical residential purchasing process. I'm not sure if this is the best topic for discussion on the podcast, but I wanted to open the dialogue with you guys. I really love the show and the magazine, and I'm grateful you to be able to use your brains as a resource. I think there could be a good potential for an article or two about appraisal/valuation process and its impact on the home building and design world, but I don't have a proposal for a specific article lined up. Well, get one, John. I think that's a fantastic idea. Others who are listening who agree, please let us know what you think about that idea. He says, also, should I go for a 10 or 12-inch sliding miter saw? Typical jobs are 2 to 4 days, so we set up and break down a lot, but we have to cross-cut big trim with a circular saw right now, and I don't like it. So 12-inch.
12-inch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're only going to have one 12-inch, I think there's reason to have both. But if you're cutting big moldings, like, got to get a big saw, right? So what do you guys think about this question?
Well, I can tell you that real estate appraisals, because I've refinanced once or twice and not been able to refinance at least once. And it's the whole real estate appraisal thing is just frustrating as heck to me, because you going into it, you have no idea what's going to come out the other end, because it's like this complicated, thing where they have to find comps in your area, and they have to assess all these weird little details that you as a homeowner or as a contractor don't know what the real numbers are going to be. As far as like stuff that's undervalued, I mean, I would agree that energy efficiency stuff, because people think like, oh, well, the house should cost the same. But when you think about the savings, if there is a true savings in energy costs, I mean, the house is obviously cheaper at the same mortgage, the same mortgage payments. So, I mean,
I agree with all those sentiments, Rob. What do you think, Matt?
I think he nailed it. I mean, those things are really impossible to assess in a walkthrough like you would do typically when you're looking for a house. I mean, there's no way that you're going to have any idea what the air barrier or the insulation are, or how they perform. But I mean, so other things that would probably be undervalued are other things that homeowners couldn't actually see. So like if you did an improvement like moving the ductwork out of unconditioned spaces and into conditioned spaces, that's another thing that nobody's gonna they may actually think that it's terrible if they see soffits running all over the place because they had to do something wacky to get all that stuff to perform better. But really just stuff that's hidden and almost untestable, I think, is probably the things that go under the radar.
To that point, Matt, I mean, maybe really what it comes down to, because like you could say, oh yeah, I spent all this money on energy improvements, but really you kind of need the proof that it's actually improved it. And so seeing more tracking of improvements, more energy data tracking in houses. I mean, as time goes by, that sort of technology gets easier to implement and cheaper. So, I mean, hopefully someday we're going to see that as a regular component in people's houses, where you can actually see the energy savings instead of just looking at an electric bill. I mean, I guess that's the simple way to do it. Look at your fuel bills, your electric bills, and compare them to other houses. That's how they typically would do it now. Yeah. If they wanted to justify those the value of those improvements. But,
What do you think about this, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, real estate assessments are so vague and, based on such superficial things for the most part. It's really hard to justify, from that standpoint.
I agree with everything John said with regard to insulation and air sealing, and what Matt said with regard to, ductwork and that kind of stuff too. And another thing I thought about was like, metal roofing, which is far more durable than asphalt shingles. It can last decades, but you don't get any, bump on your appraisal for having that kind of system. Or if you have, higher end sidings, cedar shingles or red cedar clapboards or fiber cement, like it's unfortunately just a game of square footage numbers, bedrooms and bathrooms. And that seems to be what appraisers are looking at, and not anything that those of us who care about how homes are built are totally ignored.
Yeah, but at the same time, those kinds of aesthetic things can, cause somebody to actually buy the house or, bid it up.
Yep.
If it's something that a lot of people
if it's
are
desirable.
Into. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard people say before that a lot of these changes, potential changes to the way they reappraise houses, have a lot to do with educating the consumers. I mean, this is what consumers have been conditioned to think about: is does your kitchen? I mean, the fact that people still say, does your kitchen have stone countertops? Or those are the things that people can see immediately when they walk in the door.
Yeah.
And people make decisions about buying houses on their emotional choices. They're not they're not running a business and looking at the bottom line typically when they're thinking about
why.
It's the biggest thing you'll ever.
sense.
Yeah, it's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy in your life.
And you're paying for 30 years.
I was talking to somebody recently about this, about how our energy market in our country is driven mostly by industry. I mean, we think about making all houses more energy efficient, but someone who's an accountant for a major industry is just going to buy the cheapest source of power. Homeowners, either they're not educated enough, or they're making their decisions on short-term, for short-term reasons, where if you were running a business, you're looking at the big picture.
I found it interesting that John also said that like those equations, energy costs specifically, are part of commercial valuations, but not residential. And it seems like there's a disconnect there to me.
Yeah.
I can say though, when we sold our house in Still, I put all the energy bills on the kitchen island so people could look to see how affordable the house was to run. Because I think for the right kind of buyer, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
It would to me. Okay, so this also comes from John. Thank you for creating so much educational content. The podcast is great, and I'm currently going through one of your books to help learn about building a high-performance home. Fine Homebuilding and the Green Building Advisor have pages for establishing expectations and standards through contracts and scopes of work. These documents usually seem focused on the materials, tasks, and building performance. I believe that people perform better when they are treated well. I also want to serve as a good host for people at my house. What should I request from a builder that would make it better for people working at the site? Specific enhanced safety standards, for example? Has anyone developed a best practice contract standard for worker welfare, maybe as part of a commercial construction contract? Thank you. I look forward to every episode. Wow, this is a fascinating question. So, do you guys have any idea?
I don't necessarily have an idea, but I mean, to some extent, just, making sure that whether the company is required to or not, depending on the way they're set up, is following OSHA standards. In my sort of limited experience out in the construction world, there were definitely companies that I worked for that had set themselves up in a way that they could kind of get around that stuff by
using independent contractors.
Basically, everybody who worked for them is an independent contractor. So, none of the stuff that you would should be seeing on a job site in terms of fall protection was there. And so once I did fall off a lift,
yeah,
and probably could have killed myself, but thankfully did not. But that kind of stuff, the information is out there. The standards are out there. These guys probably, these companies probably have their OSHA 30 cards or whatever. They just are not implementing that stuff on the job site. Fall protection specifically.
Rob, you got any thoughts?
So, like John was saying, you think of a typical contract as laying down what you're going to get out of the end product of the job and not what's happening during the process of the job. And I've heard a lot of smart builders recently talk about how setting up expectations for communication with the customers is an underappreciated thing to have. It's like, if you know exactly how you're expected to interact with the customer, with the client, with the on site throughout the entire process, that can go a long way to avoiding awkward or uncomfortable situations. And but as far as contracts go, I mean, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into this sort of thing. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I was always a lot more comfortable being a subcontractor on jobs, because the thought of making complicated contracts on bigger projects was one of the scariest things to me as a contractor.
And I can tell you that you can lose your shirt if you don't have a good contract. I would say that, make sure your contractor has general liability insurance, workman's compensation for employees, and employees of subs also are going to need workman's comp. And you can get these, insurance certificates from the contractors, and their insurance company should be. This is normal operating procedure. They're used to providing these documents for people, and you should definitely make sure that you get them, because otherwise, what's going to happen is if someone gets hurt on your job site, they're going to sue you, and they have a right to. So it's in your best interest to make sure that your prospective contractors have insurance and enough of it. I would say also have a place where the people working on your house can wash their hands before they eat lunch, and have either a porta-john or a place where they can use the bathroom. And then I would finally say, just be nice to them. It was it was surprising how many people are jerks to contractors, and I don't know if there's like a built-in adversarial relationship there, but it's a lot harder to want to do a good job for someone who's a jerk.
Yeah, I can tell you from experience that the homeowners that went out of their way to make us feel welcome and comfortable in the home, just little gestures. We're not talking about anything, spectacular here. Just little gestures now and then to make people feel appreciated and comfortable and welcome.
And ask them if they want some water or a snack, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to say no, thank you. But, it just shows that you're thinking about them and not just using them as, hired hands, right? And I can tell you'll get better work.
Yeah,
for sure.
Donuts on Fridays.
Donuts on Fridays. I am routinely reminded to bring donuts when I show up to job sites as a photographer, as a magazine editor. Yeah. And I like to do that because I like donuts too. So this comes from our buddy Andy Grace, who's a builder and remodeler in Ligonier, Pennsylvania, and he's the author of the upcoming slate roof feature. Hi, podcast. I'm building a new house this fall and winter. What would be a few of the building science items you would have to use? I'm definitely doing a spray-on WRB because I think it's super cool. The house will be gassed forced air. I'll probably do an ERV. I have to do a blower door test, so I'm confused about the insulation. I'd like to do dense packed cellulose and some kind of exterior foam. The client is committed to solar as well. What am I missing? Any advice? And I would say the house is to be reasonably efficient. Because it's natural gas and it is so cheap, I have trouble rationalizing too much extra cost. They have lots of room, so we're going to be doing the ground mount solar. The Bonfig wall is very interesting. I love the spray on WB because it makes a better, more airtight house. The Aero Barrier is also very cool. I wonder if anyone is doing it around here. There's only one guy around here who does blower door tests, and as you may have guessed, that has piqued my interest in doing that work. Somebody as cheap as me trying to come up with a cohesive plan for a better house seems like good podcast fodder. I would read it. I kind of wish it also happened that I could just read it now. So, Jeff, what would you do? Let's start with you. What would be your must-haves on a moderately high-performance home build?
I mean, I think so much of it seems to be in the details and taking more time than product is, and getting everything sealed up as tight as you can before insulation, because it's about air sealing.
It's about air sealing.
Yeah, and I think he's going to want to spring for that blower door testing, even if that guy is getting $500 a pop every time.
Yeah.
Like, get it before you put the windows in. I mean, you see guys, they'll put up their walls and, and put the roof on without cutting any of the openings except for one door. And then, blower door testing it to basically just get sort of a baseline and figure out where any of the leaks are in there. Then you can chase that down. And then when you do cut all the openings and put your windows in, then those are a lot easier to track down after that.
If you wait till the house is done, it is too late, because
Yeah.
you are not going to be able to fix some stuff. Like, it just is not going to be accessible.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense to do as Matt suggests, when the house is sheathed, and then again when the windows are in, and then again once the mechanical systems are in before you insulate. I think you're going to need to do all 3 times to make sure you don't miss a big hole that you can't fix later.
Yeah.
What do you think, Rob?
So I think it's so tempting to look for sort of a checklist of details as individual things, because you learn about a lot of these great systems or materials, and you want to sort of add them one by one to your project if they seem valuable or promising, or but I think really what a lot of people could focus on is, first thing, identify what building assemblies are popular and work well. Try to find local architects or builders who are who are getting really good results with a particular assembly, or just go onto like Green Building Advisor forum and start conversations about it. But basically, I think that's really where you want to start, is like start to find out what type of, because it's so climate specific, what building assembly works well in your area, rather than trying to think about the individual parts. And then maybe even go and check out some job sites of some of these people and look at assemblies up close and see what they like. Because I feel like, picking piecemeal parts of your assembly is it's so tempting to do. But I really feel like you want to find an assembly that works as a whole, that fits into your budget and that works in your climate, and pick the best one for your skills and budget. I don't know.
Yeah.
I used to be an advocate of exterior foam, but having done a little of it, it sucks. It's hard to do. It makes things everything more complicated. And I used to think double stud walls were similarly a pain, but I keep hearing from folks who build with them that it's in the wheelhouse of any carpenter to frame walls, right? And you're just doing more of it. It's not any different, really. I think the difficulty becomes when you have to insulate, a double stud wall. But as far as building it and its performance, I think it's pretty tough to beat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, each one of those wall assemblies has its pros and cons. And I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to how much of it are you going to do yourself, and what contractors you have available. Do you have a good dense pack contractor in the area? Because, each of those details you want to get right in order for the assembly to work as best as it can. Like personally, I've worked a lot with rigid foam. I feel comfortable working with it on an exterior wall, but it all comes down to what you're comfortable. Remember when we were down in Brooklyn that day? Like, we had people doing air barriers at completely different ways based on the skill set that they had on the job site,
and the color. Right, the one guy didn't like the black spray on WRB because it made the house feel like a dungeon while they were working on it. He wanted the bright yellow one, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah,
and I can't blame him, because that black stuff is very matte. It would be like a cave in there.
Yeah, it kind of felt like when you go into some like nightclub basement bathroom, that they paint the walls black.
Don't put a black light on it.
I was talking to Andy a little bit about this in an email chain we did subsequently, and I suggested that the Bond Fig wall is a pretty awesome way to make a high performance assembly that's easy to do, and I would be real tempted to do that. I have never built a house with that assembly, but it just seems so darn normal and straightforward. Like,
yeah, that's pretty much how I did my attic insulation. I didn't want to waste wood building out the skinny rafters up there, and I was like, I'll cap them with some foam. It's like you've got your thermal break, you've got a single cavity to fill that's a little bit better than this than the stock one. And as Mike Maines, I think, pointed out in one of the articles on GBA about the bond, building out a thicker wall like that, it's like you can get a significant percentage increase in R value in just a couple of inches of foam or wood, whatever you want to do to extend the wall cavity.
And the, additional expense is minimal. It's not, it just makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Here's something else that is somewhat related. So this comes from Mike from Bend, Oregon. And he says, hey guys, I'm a high performance designer builder in the high desert of Bend, Oregon, climate zone 5. I've enjoyed listening to your podcast for years and want to thank you for your contribution to better building. I was listening to your comments on a listener's letter about flash and bat recently. I'll try not to go on too much of a rant. First of all, the flash of spray foam is meant to be an air seal, but most building science folks know that spray foam is not a reliable air seal. So if it's not a reliable air seal, why would you use it to air seal? Second of all, it's not cheap. That's why it's only a flash, right? Why would you use a product that's not reliable and expensive? A way better option is using Aero Barrier to air seal and then insulate with insulation of your choice. I prefer dense packed cellulose for vapor control and carbon negative properties, to mention 2 benefits. Aero Barrier with dense packed cellulose will give you a better HERS rating and cost less than flash and bat. Again, that's not even getting into the global warming potential or toxicity risk. Sorry if that was too long, but this is me holding back. Thanks, Mike. Is this true? Is closed cell spray foam not a reliable air barrier?
It's not if it's really thin. There are code requirements for the thickness of the spray foam in flash and bat. You have to use closed cell spray foam. It has to be a minimum of 1 inch. Really, anything less than that would definitely not be a reliable air barrier.
Why is that, Matt? Have you freaking seen this stuff? Like, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, but you do see a lot of cases of that separating from the wood, and from expansion and contraction or settling of the building, because this stuff is going in, long before the building has fully settled or dried out. So you do end up with, cracks, even if they're not gigantic. You probably won't see as much of that if you're filling that entire cavity with spray foam, but definitely when it's relatively thin, it's more likely. But yeah, there's minimum thicknesses of it, and it ends up not being that inexpensive.
Right.
And whether you're filling the rest of the cavity with fiberglass or cellulose or dense pack fiberglass or whatever, it's still a better option you're not getting any thermal break from that. So if you really want to use foam, really move that to the outside, and then you get the thermal break. That even if you're using the same exact thickness of foam, you're getting a higher R value for that entire wall because you've eliminated that thermal bridge.
I would love to hear from listeners who have seen evidence of the foam separating from the framing and the sheathing in a flash and bat situation, because I had not heard this before. I think it's very interesting, and I would love to have some documented evidence of this problem.
And I wouldn't doubt that some of it has to do with, not getting the mix right or applying in,
wrong conditions,
temperatures, yeah. But it is a problem. It is an issue.
Yeah, well, you got to think about if you're doing lots of wall cavities, that's a lot of seams. That's a lot of running seams, as opposed to if you're doing 4x8 sheets of foam that are taped on the outside where you can see the actual seams being sealed up and test them immediately, and they're not going to change. Whereas if you're foaming inside a wall cavity, like you said, if framing is moving or drying out over time, you're never going to be able to see that stuff by the time
happens. By the time it fails. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is all interesting. I would love to hear more on this subject. And if anyone knows of any research or has any photographs of this problem, I would love to hear about it. Once again, on the subject of air sealing, we wouldn't want to deviate from our normal content path. Dear FHB Podcast, I love the show. I look forward to every Friday morning for the podcast and then jumping on the website or YouTube to get to see the pics that go along with. Rather than a question, I have a comment about a question number 2 from podcast 261 from John in Everett, Washington. It was the question about air sealing and insulating a wall cavity. Boy, do I have experience air sealing a house. I'm renovating a 1924 home that has board sheathing, tar paper, and cedar shake, and a leakage rate of 18.9 air changes. See,
Sounds
I've
like a
heard of
screen
homes
porch.
that have this, but I've never seen one. I think I lived in a couple, but I never didn't have a blower door at the time. He says, I chose the caulking and taping method. I have learned it may be a low-cost method, but the labor is off the charts. Of course, my personal labor is, quote, free. I have committed to the project, so I'm essentially going room by room in a battle of wills. I ruled out the flash and bat method mainly because I plan on putting on exterior insulation when the cedar shake is replaced in about 10 years. I looked at using Knopf EcoSeal, but when I looked into renting/buying a paint sprayer that could spray it and having to work under a deadline, the hassle of getting the machine to the areas I needed, I ruled this out. I am currently on my 120th tube of caulk. Once I put the drywall back up, I plan on getting a blower door test to see if I have lowered my nearly 19 air changes per hour. These are my steps. Hand clean out stud bay. 2, vacuum out stud bay. 3, vacuum out every crack between every sheathing board. 4, put in backer rod where necessary. 5, caulk first time, visually inspect. 7, caulk second time. 8, use my iPhone FLIR camera to look for missed spots. 9, caulk a third time. 10, put in airtight electrical boxes. 11, put in mineral wool. I don't know how many hours I've spent on this, but in audiobook time, it's all the Harry Potter books plus half the Game of Thrones books. Thanks for all you do, Andy in Norfolk, Virginia. So I seized upon the most important part of this question, is how many hours this is. So the collection of Harry Potter audiobooks totals 117 hours and 4 minutes. Currently, there are 5 of 7 volumes published in the Game of Thrones series. A Game of Thrones is 33 hours, 46 minutes. A Clash of Kings is 37 hours, 12 minutes. Storm of Swords, 47 hours, 34 minutes. A Feast for Crows, 33 hours, 51 minutes. A Dance with Dragons, 48 hours, 55 minutes. The Winds of Winter and the Dream of Spring are yet to come. So roughly, that if he's read half or listened to half of the Game of Thrones books, that's roughly 100 hours. So he's put 217 hours and 4 minutes into this project. Think about that.
Yeah, but it's like he would have listened to those audiobooks anyway, so it's kind of like it didn't take him any time.
Andy, I think we're ready for an intervention. I mean, if you're gonna I don't know, if you're gonna have a compulsive hobby, this doesn't seem like the worst one to have.
Did you see the pictures of all those caulked board sheathing boards?
It's just fantastic, right?
Yeah,
I love this guy.
That's dedication.
He's totally right. Caulking a house of board sheathing would be an enormous undertaking, and I love that he's bought 120 tubes of caulk. I'd love to know what his favorite product is. I bet he has some opinions by this point. What's the best thing to use?
He's probably a master with that caulk gun.
I would say, Andy, you better do a blower door test before you put the drywall back up, right? Because once again, you can't fix anything once you put the sheetrock back up. And admittedly, you're going to get a little better numbers once you put the sheetrock up, but you might find some big holes that you missed if you blow a door test before, closing up the walls.
I think if I were him, I would have gone ahead and ripped off all the siding and done the exterior foam right away first, and then you might be able to tackle it all in that way, or just putting your WRB on that, something that will really seal it up, and then put your foam over that.
So we did tons of air sealing work in the barn with canned spray foam, and I'm sure it was dozens of hours spent doing that work. Unless you're gonna bring the Aero Barrier crew out, there's no fast way to do air sealing work. And I've heard Pioneer Builders, Tim Mueller and his family, they rely on Aero Barrier now because they've decided it is too expensive for them to do the air sealing work. It just takes too much time. And they can have that Aero Barrier crew come in a morning or in an afternoon. Their house can be, down to passive level air tightness levels with, verifiable performance. So, I mean, I suggested this to Andy in our chain, and he said he would love to do this, but he doesn't have an Aero Barrier dealer in Western Pennsylvania that can do this work. And they offered to sell him a franchise, and now he's considering, like, would that make sense for him? And it might if he could get enough work, but I'm sure that setup is tens of thousands of dollars. So, you know, it's definitely an investment.
I am curious about the longevity of that system as well. Are they going back and testing those, like, you know, after the house has similarly dried and, you know, everything has settled?
Great question, Matt. And so I corresponded with their marketing director last week. I'm trying to line up a photo shoot to photograph the whole process of one of these projects on Cape Cod. And I asked that question. I was like, have you gone back to your earliest projects and retested to see if the numbers are still the same? And they're supposed to get back to me. But so the problem with this is even the oldest prototype projects were done in 2017. And I don't think that's long enough to determine sufficiently that this stuff is holding up.
Yeah.
So, you know, the answer is we don't know. But they've done allegedly accelerated lab testing to see if its performance continues, you know, as the house dries out and settles and goes through heating and cooling cycles. You know, is it going to work long term? And I think that's the big question that remains unanswered.
Yeah.
But it is an offshoot of Aero Seal, which has got a longer track record, right? So.
And I think the things are the glues, the sealants are very similar, but, you know, I don't know. And certainly ductwork is an entirely different environment. And arguably it's a harder environment to endure because of the temperature swings, right? Yeah. But I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, and the air movement, constant air movement through it too. You got to imagine it's not a bad test of the durability of that stuff.
Yeah.
So if Pioneer Builders or anyone else who's been using this for a period, have you gone back and retested the homes that have been Aero Barriered? And what were the numbers? Are they continuing to perform as they were when they were first tested? So I would love to know. If anyone can answer that, please help us out. I want to do, did you guys listen to the Pro Talk with Rob Delaney?
Yeah, I listened to the first one, yeah.
It was very entertaining. Rob is... I forget Rob's title, but he works in weatherization work in Minneapolis area, and he started his own YouTube channel called Under Pressure. And so I would tell all of you to check that out. He's promised to put up YouTube content that shows weatherization work and demonstrates basic building science principles for normal folk. And these are not high-end projects like so much of this, these content areas are dedicated to very expensive custom homes. These are working-class people who are trying to improve the performance of their very modest homes. So I think it's got great promise. He says, because I chose to go up against David Bowie and Queen, you'll have to search Under Pressure Building Science to find it, which I think is a good reminder. Both David Bowie and Queen's Under Pressure videos I've seen on YouTube are freaking amazing. So while you're searching, check those out too, I would say. My final little farewell here comes from Ben Bogey. So Ben Bogey up on the Building Knowledge page of Facebook put up this message made up of 3 signs. And the 3 signs are hand lettered individually. And the first one says, clean fill wanted. And the second one says, we like big trucks. And a third sign with a different typeface and material, it says, and we cannot lie. So if read all together, it says, clean fill wanted, we like big trucks, and we cannot lie, which is, of course, a reference to Sir Mix-a-Lot's chart-topping, Grammy-winning track, Baby Got Back from 1992. So I thought that was hilarious. It made me laugh every time I scrolled past it. I was like, that is just funny. Mm-hmm. So if you're in Maine and you got some fill you need to get rid of, you have to take it to this lot. And for those of you who don't know what this is referring to, like I remember seeing these in Pittsburgh all the time, but I haven't seen it in New England. But when you have a hilly lot, oftentimes you want to do some leveling of your topography, right? So you have people who need to get rid of soil from foundation excavations or road cuts or whatever, and you let them dump it, on your property, and they get a free place to dump and you get free fill. So if you drive around Pittsburgh, because it's such a hilly place, you will see lots with little signs out in front of them often that say clean fill wanted. And so those of you who didn't know what that is, that's what that's about. You guys looking for fill?
No, I actually had to get rid of my driveway soon. So if you want some,
you could make that deck much bigger on the back of your barn, Rob, with a few thousand yards of material, right?
Honestly, I would have gone a lot further back if it weren't for that giant maple tree that's in my way. But I didn't want to undercut the roots on that thing or bury it.
Sure, because it would die, right?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thanks to Matt, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. And please remember to like, comment, or review us however you're listening to the podcast. It helps other folks find it. And check out the podcast page for additional information and to see some of the things we talked about. It's been great spending time with you all. Thanks very much for listening. Stay safe and happy building.